Hi, welcome to our channel Programming of Mind, where we accelerate your knowledge with concise, from high-value book summaries. Let's begin the dip. How to know when to quit. One of the most difficult decisions we face in life is whether to quit. When we set out on a new venture, whether it's starting a business, learning a new skill, or pursuing a personal goal, it's natural to want to stick with it and push through difficulties. However, the ability to know when to quit is as important as knowing when to persevere. While the dip can be a time of great growth, it's also important to recognize when a situation is no longer worth your time and energy. Knowing when to quit is a critical skill for long-term success. Consider the story of Greg, a man who spent years trying to launch a tech startup. Greg was passionate about his idea, an app that could help small businesses manage their inventory more efficiently. He worked tirelessly, pouring his time and savings into the project. But despite his best efforts, the app never gained significant traction. Users weren't signing up as he had hoped, and competition from larger companies kept growing. Greg found himself in a dip, but the problem was that the app wasn't really solving a pressing need for users. The market was too saturated, and his solution wasn't as groundbreaking as he had envisioned. At some point, Greg had to make a tough decision. He could continue pouring money into a business that wasn't growing, or he could recognize that it was a dead end. Greg decided to quit the startup and shift his focus to a new idea, one that had a more specific target audience and a clearer value proposition. It wasn't an easy choice, but Greg knew that sometimes quitting is not a sign of failure, but rather an opportunity to redirect your efforts towards something more promising. By quitting the app startup, Greg freed himself to explore new opportunities, and he eventually found success with a different venture. Greg's story highlights an important lesson. Quitting isn't always about giving up. It's about making a strategic decision to move away from a dead end and towards something with more potential. Knowing when to quit allows you to stop wasting your time and resources on something that is unlikely to succeed, and instead focus on something that could lead to greater success. The ability to quit wisely is one of the most important skills in navigating the dip. Not all struggles are created equal. Some are temporary challenges that you can overcome with persistence, while others are signs that it's time to move on. But how can you know when it's time to quit and when it's worth pushing through the dip? One way to assess whether to quit is to evaluate whether the struggle is making you better. The dip is often characterized by a period of slow progress and frustration. But if that struggle is leading to personal growth, skill development, or a stronger understanding of the task at hand, it's probably worth sticking with it. For example, imagine you're training for a marathon. The months of training are physically and mentally exhausting, and there are times when you feel like giving up. But if you reflect on how far you've come, the improvements you've made in your endurance and strength, and the personal satisfaction you get from overcoming obstacles, you'll likely conclude that pushing through the dip is worth it. However, if you're not learning, growing, or enjoying any of the process, it may be time to reconsider. Take the case of Ellie, who spent years working at a corporate job she didn't enjoy. Ellie had worked her way up the ladder and had a stable position with a solid salary, but the work didn't fulfill her. She felt unmotivated and disconnected from her true passion for design. Over time, she realized that no amount of pushing through the dip was going to make her happy in the corporate world. It was clear that her struggle was not leading to personal growth or satisfaction. So, after much reflection, Ellie decided to quit her job and pursue a career in graphic design. She enrolled in design courses, built a portfolio, and eventually landed a job at a creative agency where she thrived. Ellie's story demonstrates the importance of self-awareness when deciding whether to quit. The dip is often an opportunity to develop resilience, but if the struggle is not leading to personal growth or fulfillment, quitting can be the best choice. Sometimes, walking away from something that no longer serves you opens the door to a more rewarding path. Another way to know when it's time to quit is to assess the potential for future success. When you're in the dip, it's easy to feel like success is just around the corner. But it's important to realistically evaluate whether the effort you're putting in will yield long-term results. Take the example of Chris, an aspiring writer who spent years writing novels and submitting them to publishers. Despite his hard work, he was constantly rejected. Chris faced the classic dip, a long stretch of failure and frustration. But as time went on, he began to notice a trend. His writing wasn't improving, and a rejection letter seemed more like a sign that the market wasn't interested in his work. Eventually, Chris recognized that continuing to pursue writing wasn't the right path for him. Instead of continuing to chase a dream that wasn't working, Chris decided to pivot. He took his love for storytelling and turned it into a career in screenwriting, which gave him the chance to work with a larger team and create visual narratives. His decision to quit writing novels didn't mean giving up on his passion. It meant redirecting his energy towards something that better aligned with his skills and the market demand. Chris's story highlights an important point. Quitting doesn't have to mean abandoning your dreams. It's about knowing when to pivot and when to redirect your efforts to something more viable. The dip may not always be a sign that you need to give up entirely. It may be a signal that you need to reassess your approach and find new direction. When evaluating whether to quit, it's also helpful to consider the opportunity cost. Every hour you spend on something that isn't working is an hour you could be spending on something more fruitful. If your efforts aren't yielding results, ask yourself, what could you be doing instead? Is there another project, career path, or goal that you're passionate about? And that would be a better use of your time. The decision to quit should be seen as an investment in your future success. By letting go of something that isn't working, you create space for something more rewarding. Take the story of Frank, a man who had always dreamed of opening a coffee shop. He spent years planning, securing funding, and building the business. But after a few years of operation, Frank realized that the business wasn't as profitable as he had hoped. The coffee shop was struggling to compete with larger chains, and Frank found himself constantly putting in more money just to keep things afloat. After much deliberation, Frank decided to quit the coffee shop and focus on another passion, organic farming. He sold the coffee shop and used the profits to invest in a farm that specialized in growing organic produce. Today, Frank runs a successful farm, and while it wasn't the business he initially set out to create, it has been far more fulfilling and profitable. Frank's decision to quit the coffee shop wasn't easy, but it was ultimately the right one. By quitting, he was able to focus on a new opportunity that aligned better with his long-term goals and interests. The lesson here is that quitting can open the door to better opportunities and allow you to invest your time and resources where they will have the greatest impact. In conclusion, knowing when to quit is one of the most important decisions you can make in the pursuit of success. The dip is a natural part of any challenge, but it's not always a sign to push through. Sometimes, quitting is the best way to redirect your efforts towards something more fulfilling or promising. The key is to assess whether the struggle is leading to growth, whether there is potential for future success, and whether continuing is the best use of your time. Quitting isn't failure. It's a strategic decision that allows you to focus on what truly matters. Thank you for listening, and please like the video and subscribe for more great upcoming content that will put you in top 1% people in the world.